Morning. Thank you all for being here today, and I also want to thank Commissioner Mike Cheney of the Insurance Commissioner of Mississippi for being with us today, and we also have had representatives from Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's office both in our 10 a.m. Briefing as well as here in the room as well. It goes without saying that it has been a long weekend for Mississippi as floodwaters have continued to rise at the Pearl River and around central Mississippi. A weekend that would have been much, much longer if not for the hard work and diligence of the men and women at MEMA, at MDOT, and at all of our state and local law enforcement agencies. After days of rising floodwaters, we do have some positive news to report this morning. Just like yesterday when we had relatively good news, this morning we have even better news. It appears that the Pearl River is currently at 36.74 feet and that we believe that it is expected to be at or near its crest at this moment. Additional rises are expected to occur in certain areas, but we expect them to be localized, particularly near the Highway 80 area. At the reservoir, the output will be decreased again this afternoon as the lake has experienced a slight drop in levels. We mentioned yesterday that the equalization had occurred where the inflow and the outflow had reached a certain point yesterday, and so we anticipate that they will further reduce the outflow at 6 p.m. today with the potential of perhaps further reducing it tomorrow morning. There are several inches of water in structures north of Lakeland. Coordinated responses by state and local law enforcement continue in those areas. We do understand that all immediate needs and all immediate requests are being met. At this time, over 156,000 sandbags have been distributed throughout the impacted area. The shelter at the Jackson Police Training Center is still open with plenty of available space for those being asked to evacuate. In the Oktibbeha County shelter that I told you yesterday had been open, they had 0 people staying there overnight, and therefore we will close that shelter by noon today. At the Jackson shelter at the Jackson Police Academy, we had a census count of 24 people stayed there overnight, and therefore we have a little over 100 spaces available that will remain open for the foreseeable future. I do want you to know that if you have experienced damage to your property, residents can self-report damage to county EMAs through MEMA's self-reporting tool. The link for each county that can be found on MEMA's website, and that is at www.msema.org. Local officials and law enforcement continue to make door-to-door notifications to let people in impacted areas know that they need to evacuate. To date, we have performed 16 assisted evacuations throughout this situation, with parks having made 200 door-to-door and over 600 public contacts yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, after seeing a drop in water levels along I-55 at Daniel Lake, the Mississippi Department of Transportation crews reopened the outside lanes of I-55 in addition to the frontage roads at Daniel Lake Boulevard. Closure equipment will remain on the shoulders until the flood threat is over. The closures underway near State Street remain in place at this time. MDOT crews are closely monitoring these roads, and should conditions allow, the closures will be removed and the State Street exit will be reopened. That will be a decision that will be revisited later this afternoon. But just to reiterate that point, I told you yesterday that there were lanes on I-55, both northbound and southbound, south of the city, that were closed. That is no longer the case. All 6 lanes, 3 southbound, 3 northbound, are open at this time. Now, while we are here to report relatively good news for Jackson and for Central Mississippi. We as a state are not in the clear yet. Do not walk or drive through floodwaters. Turn around, don't drown. If you were told to evacuate, please heed these orders and do not return until officials have told you it's safe. If in fact the current projections of having crested are accurate, please know that we do expect the water to recede relatively quickly over the next 2 to 3 days. But as it is receding, it is going to be fast flowing water, and just like was the case over the weekend, we strongly discourage anyone from getting in or trying to drive through the water. We have been monitoring radar and weather reports and did have a briefing from the National Weather Service this morning. We do anticipate more heavy rainfall for this region. In fact, we could see as much as 1 to 2 inches of rainfall on Monday night, Tuesday, and into Tuesday evening. We could potentially see additional rainfall later in the week, Thursday, maybe even into Friday, of a ½ an inch to an inch. If that is the case, we don't anticipate seeing further rises in the central Mississippi area. However, as the floodwaters move, we begin to look downriver at Copiah County, Simpson County, Lawrence County, Jeff Davis County, Marion County, Pearl River County, and Hancock counties. We have contacted and are working closely with the state and local law enforcement officials to prepare our response and deliver immediate aid downriver should it become necessary. We do anticipate that there will be potential flooding in and around Marion County, specifically in the city of Columbia, potentially depending upon what the river does over the next couple of days. I encourage everyone to continue to follow MEMA on social media and tune into your local news to receive updates and alerts. Again, I want to thank the hardworking men and women of MEMA, of all state agencies. I have been exceptionally impressed with how hard every state agency that's been involved in this response to date, and I know they will also be involved in the recovery as we move from response mode to recovery mode. And the reality is that they are doing all in their power to ease this very difficult time on so many Mississippians. They have been working diligently around the clock to aid in these storm response systems, and we as Mississippians all owe not only our state friends and partners, our state agencies, but also our local EMA directors, our local law enforcement, and just citizens across the state a debt of gratitude. Everyone has worked very well together, and that's something that I am proud of. We're making progress, but we still have more work to do. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Michelle and let him fill in any blanks.
Thank you, Governor. I'd just like to speak to the state's posture, current posture, and where we are right now. As always, safety and security is first priority for everyone, making sure that folks have a place to go, and also making sure that the property that they leave behind is safe. So be aware that it continues to be our focus as part of the response effort. As the floodwaters begin to pause, and we are thankful that they are nearing their crest levels, we start looking at recovery. You heard the governor mention previously about the damage assessment tool, the crisis track damage assessment self-reporting tool. It is extremely important that if you have the opportunity to do that, to go in and make those self-reporting notes for us. That will aid us in putting our plan together. It will aid us in updating our current flood mitigation maps, inundation maps, because we do know that some of that data is dated because we're working off 83 data. So any information that you can put as far as water, that's in your home, or the damage water, whether it be outside or in, will be extremely helpful. But as always, we will start our efforts towards the recovery, and we know that it's going to be a very long and enduring process. I want to just take this second to say also, with thanks to everyone that was in the area identified for evacuation. We had very few given the number that we had anticipated, so that's a testament to the local citizens that they heeded the warnings, and we're very much appreciative of that. and not unnecessarily placing the lives of our first and emergency responders to danger. So thank you. Governor?
Thank you, Director Michelle, for your hard work. And again, I can't mention often enough how important it has been that those that have been affected and those that have been in harm's way have heeded the call to evacuate, to go to a friend's house, to go to a family member's house. The fact that we've only had 16 notable search and rescue operations is really a testament that in what is quite frankly probably one of the most difficult types of natural disasters, because floodwaters are very slow rising. And so while you know you have a pretty good idea of where the water is going to go, it's hard for people to heed the call. But folks in Central Mississippi have done just that. And because of that, it has mitigated and minimized the number of search and rescue teams that we've had to put in harm's way. And so I just want to commend all folks in Central Mississippi. We really do appreciate that. I also want to again reiterate something that Director Michelle said, because I don't think this can be said often enough. As we move from the current phase into recovery, accurate data and accurate information is going to be critical as we maximize the resources that we can bring both to you individually as well as to the local governmental entities and working with our federal partners. And so please help us get that accurate data and accurate information by going to the website and self-reporting your damages. It's msema.org. At this time, I'm going to ask Commissioner of Insurance, would you like to say a few words? Okay. Having nothing further, I'll be happy to take any questions from the media. Yes, ma'am.
So what's like recovery for dummies, step 1, 2, 3, as soon as it's all over and done?
Well, recovery for dummies. What I would tell you is that the first thing that we need is if you would go to self-report on the website, if you would take pictures of your home that has water in it. That's going to help you not only from an insurance standpoint. Many of these individuals are insured by the National Flood Insurance Program, and I can tell you that if you will take pictures of the water in your home, of the damage that has been done, that will be incredibly important. Again, the water is still up, and so we don't want you to return to your home immediately to do this. So if the water is in your home, wait until the water recedes, which should occur over the next 2 to 3 days, and then take pictures, upload onto the website msema.org what that damage is, and that would go a long way towards helping. From our perspective, we are working with local EMA, with the city, with the counties affected and involved in terms of looking at the potential for further declarations for public assistance, as well as what declarations may be necessary to seek help in terms of public infrastructure that has been destroyed. Obviously, having rising water on top of roads is not good for that infrastructure. It's also not good. Flooding is not at all good for those pipes that are in the ground, whether it's water or sewer. And we anticipate that as the water recedes, that we're going to have damages. And in fact, we're sure of it. And so, as we, from our perspective, monitor that, and Greg and I were talking earlier, we're going to have individuals that work for MEMA, et cetera, out doing some damage assessments when it becomes appropriate, so that we can ensure that we are able to utilize our federal resources and federal partners to rebuild our infrastructure.
Greg, do you have any better idea of how many homes in Jackson might have been flooded?
It's a good question. The governor, I talked about today. We didn't have as many as we had anticipated because the water didn't go to the levels, thank goodness, that we had anticipated. But we're going to have some homes in some areas that were flooded that we had not anticipated at this level either. So I don't have an exact number of those. I promised the governor that we would get a better idea on the number of homes that actually were inundated with water as opposed to those that were affected, and we should have those numbers by the latter part of this week.
Do you think it'll be in the dozens?
Numbers of homes, it's going to be in the hundreds, absolutely. I mean, we had projected 1,058 homes that would be affected in the Hinds County area. Then you take another 1 to 200 that would in Rankin County, and then in Madison County, of course, the number was less because those structures have been identified were less. But it will be hundreds of homes, and will very likely approach 1,000 totally.
Do you have a projection or an understanding of why the projections are off? Was it the new infrastructure and lay of the land? Were the guesstimates just wrong on the river, the water, and the inflow?
So all the partners, the hydrology partners have been managing this is a good question, and they're looking at the data now. The numbers that were used back from '83, based on the amount of water coming out of the reservoir that was inundated down the Pearl River, are lower than they had projected. So they're looking at that. The bottom line is we've got to update our data, and now we've got really good data that we can use that will help us in the future. The good news is it did project to be lower. And I'd say the additional good news is that we've got, even though homes have been affected and our hearts go out to them, we'll be able to update our data so the next time that happens will be more accurate.
Yeah, and I would just also point out that the fact is that in certain spots, the data that we had, 35.8 and 36 feet actually felt like 38. And part of the reason for that is that over the last 37 years since 1983, there's been a lot of construction that has occurred and transpired throughout the city of Jackson. Because of that additional construction, the water is going to find its level, and so the finding of that level has changed things. And so while it looks like we're probably going to crest very near 37 feet as opposed to the original projections of 38, again, if you are in North Jackson and South Jackson in Rankin County, the fact that you got 6 inches of water in your home rather than getting 1.5 feet doesn't give you a whole lot of reason for optimism. You still received water in your home, and we want to do everything we can to help those individuals recover from this very difficult disaster.
Governor, we've seen this happen in previous events. People see river cresting means it's time to run back to the house.
Yeah, this is not the time to run back to your house. We think that we are either at or near the crest of the river, and we do think that it's going to recede relatively quickly over the next couple of 3 days. But please do not move back into your neighborhood or into your home until authorities and officials give you the okay to do so, because if not, you're putting yourself in harm's way. And if we saw a mass inflow into those neighborhoods, moving towards water that could be as much as 2 or 3 feet, we could see some real challenges. We also know that the water that is out there is not 100% clean, and so do not play. Please do not allow your kids to play in the water. Do not allow your friends or your neighbors to play in the water. Let's stay out of the water and let's let it recede, and then let's start working together as Mississippians do and recover from this tragedy.
There's no reports of anyone getting hurt.
I am not aware of any reports of injuries at this time.
Well, and I concur with the governor. We've not had any reports of any injuries, which is a good thing.
And by the way, we're not aware of any injuries at this time, and the reason for that is because the people of Mississippi heeded the advice of law enforcement and emergency personnel and got out. And that's something that I'm most proud of. And, you know, one of the things that we as Mississippians know better than most is natural disasters. Obviously, we all remember Hurricane Katrina and what that meant to all of us, but we've seen tornadoes in so many of our communities. Rising water is certainly a challenging natural disaster, but certainly one that our Mississippians heeded the call this time.
Can you discuss what thresholds would need to be met to qualify for assistance? Usually government assistance is a little easier because of the cost of infrastructure, but for individual assistance.
I'll let Greg comment on that.
So, right, the public assistance disaster grants are monetary thresholds at the county level and at the state level, and they are pretty easy to monitor. Individual assistance grants are very subjective. So you heard me earlier talk about, and the governor talk about the damage, the self-reporting tool on Crisis Track. It's important because any data that we get we've got to add to that. Socio-demographic information, the number of folks that we've had in our shelters, the number of folks that have been displaced, that are going to be long-term displaced. So the bottom line is very subjective. There is no set formula for it, but there's a lot of data that will go into that. That's why it's very important that we collect as much information from the individuals as we can.
Can the grants be used to pay a flood insurance deductible?
Can the grants be used to pay flood insurance deductibles?
If you've got
that's good.
flood insurance, can you get a grant?
Yes. And that's probably a better question for the commissioner to talk, because he answered the question for me. You want to speak to that, Commissioner?
Well, you can get a grant if you have private insurance, especially. We have less than 1,000 policies in these areas, so it's hard to say which ones are NFIP. We've got a fairly good number, and we do have some private insurance. It's covered in Rankin County, and it's covered by a company that was formed after Katrina on the Gulf Coast to cover folks. And if you need assistance in all of your recovery efforts on answering insurance questions, especially on flood insurance, feel free to call the department. 1-800-562-2957. Again, 1-800-562-2957. Ask for Andy or Ryan. That's what I tell everyone, because it's easy to find those guys, and they're listening to me, I guess, right now, because they are watching. And we will help you. We were very successful in negotiating with NFIP after the floodwaters at Eagle Lake specifically. It's not normally something we would be involved in because these are federal programs, but since they are sold by private companies on Write Your Own, we've taken the position that we can intervene, and the feds have let us do that. We have I will tell you that we have an excellent working relationship with MEMA. We are utilizing Crisis Track through their efforts to look at homes that may have flood insurance, so we can work with them to get their recovery back up and going as quick as possible for the families.
Mike, you said 1,000 policies. Could you clarify? You mean 1,000 people who have flood insurance?
We estimate that, and this is from FEMA again, that there are 1,000 families or homeowners that have flood insurance, and these can go all the way down to Columbia, Mississippi, as well as up here in Rankin County. But Rankin County has a lot of private flood, Scott. I just don't have the numbers with me.
And I wondered, does that mean if they don't have a flood insurance policy, they're not covered?
If you do not have flood insurance, you're not covered. Your homeowner's insurance policy, and we say this day in and day out when we do press releases, your homeowner's insurance policy does not cover flood. If you got flood, it's going to be a separate policy. We ask our agents, and General Boyle can tell you this, he's been in this business, to put on the front of that policy, you do not have flood insurance if you don't buy it, and a big red stamp, so you don't have it. We want the consumer to know. And we've alleviated a lot of those problems that we normally have with people saying, I'm not covered for flood, and I know I'm not, because when I bought my policy, my insurance agent said, you need flood insurance, it's cheap, but I declined it because I needed to save the money. We have changed that mindset and that thought to where people now understand why they need flood insurance. And that, by the way, that's a big issue for us, because the NFIP is due to expire again in September of this year, and I want to commend Senator Wicker and Senator Hyde-Smith for trying in their efforts to keep this flood program going in D.C.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Oh, good.